Matthew here from MiniWarGaming.com, and one of the biggest complaints that I get about Games Workshop is not the quality of their models or the funness of their games, it's the price. Everybody likes to complain about the price. And to be honest, it is expensive. It's quite expensive. And that's kind of what hobbies are like. But how would you like to be able to get similar models that you can use in your 40K and fantasy armies for less than half the price? Well, that is where Mantic Games comes in. They have provided a cheaper, less expensive alternative to Warhammer Fantasy and Warhammer 40K. I want to showcase 3 of the armies that they have specifically for replacing Warhammer 40K. And these ones are for the Imperial Guard, the Space Marines, and the Orcs. And I want to show you how you can easily save half of the normal cost of what you normally get with Games Workshop if you're willing to go with ones that don't look exactly the same as Games Workshop models. And if you don't work or don't play at Games Workshop tournaments, because they won't let you bring these in. But if you play anywhere else, they shouldn't have a problem. So let's take a look. What you're seeing right here is 3 different armies. We've got the Enforcers, the Marauders, and the Corporation, or the Space Marines, Orcs, and Imperial Guard. These are the main ones that they have out for their Warpath, or their Warhammer 40K alternative. They do have some other armies as well, Forge Fathers and Vermeer, but they don't specifically replace any army. They're more just adding on to their own brand. So I want to look at each of these individually. Let's look at the Orcs first. So if you were to buy these 3 boxes, actually you'd have to buy 2 of these. These are the replacement for the trucks. And then you get their 1-player battle set and their Marauders army. Then you would in the end have a total of 81 models. Oh, I'm sorry, and we're missing the leader, the Marauder leader as well, who works as the war boss. You would have a total of 81 models. So basically 80 boys, including the knobs from the squads, plus the war boss, plus 2 truck alternatives, plus 3 war track alternatives. Now, if you were to buy all of this from Games Workshop, even using their battle forces, it would cost you around $400. But the retail price of all of this Mantic stuff, so you buy this, 2 of these, and then the one I don't have featured here, which is the leader, which you'd use as a war boss, it'll cost you $194.95. So that is less than half of the cost of what you would get with the Games Workshop miniatures. Let's take a look at the Enforcers. Now these are the Space Marine-ish equivalents that you can use to represent your Space Marines there. They even have similar weapons and upgrades. And right here, what you have is an Enforcer army plus a few extra models here, so equivalent to about 1,000 points of Space Marines. If you were to buy this from Games Workshop, this is actually where it's most cost effective because there's a lower model count, whereas the Orcs have a very high model count. It would cost you about $216 from Games Workshop, buying the Battle Force, so you're getting the best deal and everything, and then buying the extra boxes to fill out the rest. Well, these 3 things, which you'd have to buy in order to get that same 1,000 points, would cost you $105 with Mantic. So $216 or $105. Once again, if you're willing to go for something that doesn't quite look like Space Marines, but really does fit in as good proxies for them, and heck, you might even like them better than the way the Space Marines looks, or the Space Marines look, depending on your tastes. And then lastly, let's take a look at the Corporation army. This army is the one that can replace Imperial Guard quite easily. This one is probably the most obvious replacement because you can see they even have the heavy weapons teams, and then they've got the regular squads and veterans and stormtroopers and everything else in here. So if you were to get all these, plus a couple other things, basically to represent the commanders, then this would cost you, with Games Workshop, this would be about 900 points. It would cost you about $350 with Games Workshop, using, of course, their battle forces to save some money. And with Mantic, this same army would cost you $137. So once again, half the price. This is actually even lower than half the price. So you save a lot of money here. So basically, like I said, I'm not suggesting that you don't buy Games Workshop miniatures. I'm just suggesting that you have an alternative here to maybe flesh out some of the larger areas of your army. For example, with the Orcs, you can get a lot of their just regular Orcs if you don't mind the way they look. And they don't look the same as the Orcs from Games Workshop, but they are similar enough that they definitely do fit in as proxies. And then if you still want to get some Games Workshop models for their trucks or their planes and things that they basically, that Mantic does not provide, because Mantic still is building up their range for Warpath, so it doesn't replace nearly everything yet. So you can just use these to replace some of the more expensive ones, or just basically to bring down the cost of an entire army. Looking at it, basically a 2,000 point Space Marine army, if you were to build it a certain way with Games Workshop, would cost you over $400, but only $200 with Mantic. So you can save a lot of money here by doing this wisely. Like I said, you don't necessarily always want to replace your Games Workshop miniatures with alternatives, but if you do want to save some money, if you're one of those people who every dollar counts for your hobby purchases, where you really want to make it so you can build up as much of an army as possible, then you definitely want to take a look at Mantic, which of course you can buy on the MiniWarGaming online store. If you go to miniwargaming.com/buy-Mantic, or you just go to store.miniwargaming.com and navigate to the Mantic section, whatever you prefer. And remember, you also get the rewards points and everything else at our store. So save money, get even more for your Warhammer 40k, and the Warhammer Fantasy has even a larger selection with the Kings of War armies from Mantic to save you even more money in your Warhammer Fantasy and your Warhammer 40k. This is Matthew from MiniWarGaming. Happy wargaming.